James Arthur Baldwin was born on August 2nd, 1924, and passed away at the age of 63. Baldwin was a leader of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement and a prolific writer. Many celebrated the centennial of his birth this past month in August of 2024. And in this article, I want to argue that the ideas and writing of James Baldwin offer powerful and practical prescriptions for the types of healing we desperately need in the United States of America. I grew up in Manhattan, Kansas in the 1980s, largely sheltered and isolated from the writings of Black Americans. When I was a senior, I took a course by my teacher, Carol Adams, that was called AP U.S. Literature, and maybe it wasn't AP. It was our senior English class, anyway. And in that course, we had opportunities to select different thematic units that we would read and then write essays on. And in that unit, I was first introduced to the writing of Richard Wright in his book, Native Son. And that was a challenging encounter with some of the experiences of African Americans in the United States, as well as a naturalist philosophy of holding that the circumstances and environment in which people sometimes find themselves are very deterministic in the outcomes that they have in their lives and the choices that they make. I remember really recoiling against that and writing against that because I was a very idealistic kid. And I also just really hadn't had any experience with that. I didn't have any close African American friends until much, much later in life, actually, until I was in graduate school at the Air Force Academy. And then later, as I've been a professional educator, not only in Texas, but also in Oklahoma and here in North Carolina, I've been blessed with several different friendships with African American men. I am very thankful that this past fall, in the fall of 2023, my wife Shelley and I had a chance to take a multi-week online course called Confronting Whiteness. And a Charlotte pastor here in Charlotte, North Carolina, Ben Boswell, actually created this Confronting Whiteness course, which you can find on confrontingwhiteness.com, as a result of the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests and the seeming inability, or at least very high difficulty with which his largely white Christian congregation had to gain empathy for and understand and really just move forward with conversations with African American brothers and sisters and fellow citizens. And so we took this course, and I think it was over I want to say maybe 10 weeks or something. I don't think it was a 15-week course. But each week we would engage with a series of media artifacts. So these would be book chapters, podcasts, articles, and videos. And the work of James Baldwin featured prominently in that curriculum. And I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit that it was last fall, when I was 53 years old, that I first came into close contact and awareness of the works of James Baldwin. If I had heard of of his work before, I had not read it myself, and it had not made an impact on me. That was a very powerful experience, and as I said, I think I'm very thankful to be in the place that I am in life as a middle school teacher, as a member of our Christian church in Uptown Charlotte, as a citizen in my community, as a connected educator, married as I am to Shelley, who is committed to a similar journey of learning. We're living in an extremely challenging, polarized, and uncertain time. There's been lots of uncertain times. There have been polarizing times as well in the history of the United States and the history of the world. But I think that it's incumbent upon each of us to take responsibility to try to move ourselves forward with our own journeys of trying to understand the world, trying to understand each other, and especially trying to become culture healers. And that's why I'm sharing this audio article draft on my website, healourculture.org, and why I'm going to suggest that the works of Baldwin can be very powerful and potentially transformative in moving us forward in this quest. And so, on the occasion of the centennial of Baldwin's birth, which was actually last month in August of 20, it seems both appropriate and urgent to recommend that all of us revisit or visit for the first time his ideas as we seek to find healing ourselves, to serve as cultural healers within our respective communities. And so I want to recommend 8 different resources that can assist in this endeavor. And these actually are the 8 resources that I am committing to read for the first time, watch for the first time, or re-engage with. And 4 of these resources are about James Baldwin, and then 4 of them are by James Baldwin. As I think it's really important to not only read and listen and watch things that other people create about his work, it's very important to engage directly with his work, with his writings, and with his ideas. And so I'll have all of these linked in the description of this video that I'm going to share on YouTube, and then also on the blog post that I'm writing on healourculture.org. So the first resource is the CBS Sunday morning segment called James Baldwin at 100. And if you're not familiar with CBS Sunday morning, this is my father's, I think, favorite program. Every time I visit him in Manhattan, Kansas, and we're there over a weekend, which we usually are, he has this program recorded and he watches it pretty religiously. And this was an episode that was published on August 11th, 2024. And it has a really excellent summary with a lot of excellent interviews about Baldwin. Let me read you the description that is provided for this 5-minute and 15-second video. A century after his birth in Harlem, the writer and activist James Baldwin is being celebrated for his visionary work and for the many facets of his personality. Black, gay, playwright, essayist, New Yorker, expatriate, that transformed him into an iconic figure in the civil rights movement, even beyond his death in 1987 at age 63. Sunday morning contributor Khalifa Sena looks back at the author of such noted works as Notes of a Native Son, The Fire Next Time, and Giovanni's Room. Now, I'll mention that of these 8 resources that I'm sharing, all of these are publicly available, and you don't have to purchase anything in order to access them. There's just one book, which is actually, I think, going to be my last recommended resource that I don't think there's a free version of and you need to purchase. But this is the CBS Sunday morning episode about Baldwin is just free online, and you can access it on YouTube. The second resource I want to recommend is really a primary catalyst for this entire post and this entire idea that Baldwin's ideas and work can be a very powerful catalyst for us for personal transformation, as well as specifically trying to discern how is it that we can understand each other and our society and our communities better and act as cultural healers. And so this is a podcast posted by my teacher colleague and friend, David Harris. David started a podcast last year called The Teachers Forum, and this is the first podcast of his second season. And it was just published this last week, the first week of September 2024. And the title of this podcast is James Baldwin at 100, Teaching Race, Identity, and the Power of Truth. It is 56 minutes long, and it features a panel discussion between David, Dr. Yvonne Destin, and also Tyron Dandridge. And I'll include a link to this. The main website for the Teachers Forum is on Buzzsprout. It's theteachersforum.buzzsprout.com. But again, I will include links to that podcast, and there are some excellent resources that these 3 men recommend in the podcast that go beyond what I'm going to be recommending here in this article and in this audio and video. The third resource I want to recommend is the Wikipedia article on James Baldwin. One of the things that I have grown to do as a middle school media literacy and STEM teacher the past 6 years, this is my 29th year in education. I haven't been a classroom teacher that whole time, but I've been teaching middle school. This is I guess I taught it 3 years in middle school, 3 years in Oklahoma, and this is starting my 3rd year here in North Carolina, is to utilize Wikipedia articles as a launching point, a launch pad for an inquiry into a particular topic, or in this case, a particular person. I often share with my students that as classroom teachers, I don't think you will ever hear a social studies, history, English teacher, or any teacher for that matter, recommend that for a research project, you only look at one source. As teachers, we are conditioned, I think, to know students and academics, we got to look at more than one source. We got to see what different people are saying. And I am in no way, shape, or form suggesting that the only place you should look is Wikipedia. But I think that Wikipedia articles often provide an outstanding summary. They are crowdsourced. They are not written by single individuals. You can click at the top of the article to see the history page, to see the contributions, to see the talk page where if there's anything controversial, arguments are had about different things, different points. And so this article, which talks about Baldwin's early life, his career, his deaths, his themes, his social and political activism, his inspiration in relationships, his legacy and critical responses to him, his honors and awards, his works, his media appearances. It's fantastic. And so I recommend that you check that out. And then I always point out also when I talk to my students about how when you go to the bottom of every Wikipedia article, you are going to find references or citations. And as I record this today on September the 8th, 2024, there are 264 references to the article on Wikipedia. And in addition, there are excellent links to further reading, to archival resources. There's external links. It's just fantastic. It is absolutely fantastic. And so please use the Wikipedia article for James Baldwin as not only a launching point for your inquiry and your own extended understanding of Baldwin, his life, and the impact of his ideas, but also as a way to engage and connect with additional resources, many of which, like 7 of the 8 I'm mentioning here, are available free. I guess I should say 6 of 8, because this 4th resource I'm going to recommend is streaming on Hulu, which again, as I record this now, I think is part of Disney Plus. And so you do have to be a subscriber or know someone who's a subscriber that you can watch this with. But this is a movie called I Am Not Your Negro. And here's a short description of it. I Am Not Your Negro is a documentary film directed by Raoul Peck based on an unfinished manuscript by James Baldwin. Narrated by Samuel L. Jackson, the film explores Baldwin's reflections on the civil rights movement and his relationships with prominent figures like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and Medgar Evers, offering a powerful critique of racism in America through Baldwin's eyes. The film weaves together Baldwin's writing with archival footage, creating a thought-provoking narrative on race, identity, and the ongoing struggle for equality. Referencing back to the Confronting Whiteness course that my wife and I participated in and completed this past year in the fall of 2023, there were so many wonderful resources that Ben Boswell recommended each week. In fact, that pedagogy or that instructional method is informing what I am doing in a multi-part course that I have been teaching for adults through the Media Education Lab called Teaching the Conspiracies. I taught the first segment of that as a 6-part course in the spring of 2024, and the second part this summer as a 2-week micro-credential course. I'll be offering the 3rd part this next spring in January 2025. And that pedagogy is to have some required and then optional media recommendations or artifacts. Again, these are articles, blog posts, podcasts, videos. And in order to have a conversation with someone about a topic, we need to have some shared experiences or some shared perceptions or understandings of things. As an aside, I love this idea in Edie Hirsch's book, Cultural Literacy. I don't subscribe to all of Hirsch's ideas about the appropriate canon for the curriculum in U.S. schools. I think it should be much more diverse and extensive than what he advocates. But that idea of needing to have some shared experiences, some needed exposure to ideas to have a conversation is really important. And so that idea that, hey, let's all read, watch, or listen to these media artifacts. I can't say books or articles because there's audio podcasts, there's videos, so it's media. But let's all definitely read, watch, or listen to these particular artifacts. And then optionally, if you want more, you can check out these additional resources. This movie, I Am Not Your Negro, was one of those additional resources that Ben Boswell recommended in the Confronting Whiteness course, but I did not have time to I didn't watch it. And so I'm adding it to my list. Okay, so those are 4 resources that I recommend, which are about James Baldwin. Now I'd like to recommend 4 specific writings, which are book chapters, which are articles, which are essays that Baldwin wrote. And 3 of the 4 are openly accessible. The first one is called A Talk to Teachers, and Baldwin published this on October 16th, 1963. And so here's a summary. A Talk to Teachers is an essay and speech by James Baldwin, addressing the role of education in society, particularly in shaping the consciousness of both Black and white Americans. Baldwin argues that education must empower students to question societal norms and recognize the oppressive structures within the U.S., especially concerning racism. He emphasizes the responsibility of teachers to encourage critical thinking and moral integrity in students rather than simply preparing them to conform to a flawed and unjust system. And I guess I maybe should have said at the outset of this article that one of my beliefs about healing our culture is that in order to heal our culture, we need to tell the truth. We need to seek the truth. We need to debate about the truth. We need to, in some cases, uncover experiences and events and conflicts that have happened historically and that are happening in contemporaneous times so that we can uncover the dynamics that led to those events and those conflicts, but we can also discern how it is we can heal from and through those experiences. And so, while I think an important part of the Heal Our Culture project, which is something I started last year in 2023, and I aspirationally want to continue to build in the months and years ahead, is amplifying really positive examples of ways that people are healing our culture, are helping, are demonstrating kindness, are serving each other, are moving us forward as a community, building the bonds of community between people and groups of people rather than fracturing them, polarizing them, and even destroying those bonds. This is the idea of being a culture healer and not a culture warrior. So that's an important concept because as we seek to engage in this work, individually and collectively, there are going to be controversial topics that are going to come up. There's going to be difficult conversations to have. And unfortunately today, as I record this in the fall of 2024, it is really hard to have conversations in school, whether you're talking about a public school or a private school, a university and college setting, or a K-12 setting. It's really hard to talk about contemporary politics. It's also really hard to talk about racism. There are so many hot button issues, and this is one of the things that we see in the culture war, is that issues in quote unquote the culture war have been weaponized to the point where people can become extremely emotional and in some cases very defensive and hostile, and people end up losing their jobs because they've talked about things or they've said things, and so it's very difficult. So I'm looking forward to completely reading this article, A Talk to Teachers by Baldwin. It was in October of 63. That was just a month before President Kennedy was assassinated. As a teacher, I am really aware of the role that I play as a culture worker, as someone who helps hopefully constructively and hopefully shape the minds of young students. And so I think the ideas that Baldwin shares here, they certainly are in line with my passion as a media literacy educator and a teacher, striving to help my students gain the capacity and develop their capacity to intelligently and rigorously interrogate media and interrogate media messages and attempt to discern a variety of things about those messages, their intended audience, their author or source, the techniques that the writer or creator may be employing to try and gain attention and, in some cases, move an audience, move individuals to think different things, act in different ways, etc. I think Baldwin's essay here is very much in line with my pre-existing beliefs about education and specifically media literacy education. But of course, it's specifically focused on critical thinking when it comes to the history of our nation and our history of racism. The sixth resource that I'd like to recommend is also available free, and it is called The Last Interview. And here is a summary. James Baldwin, The Last Interview, highlights Baldwin's reflections on themes of racial identity, social justice, and the role of the artist as a witness to both. Baldwin discusses the complexities of love, both personal and political, as a means of transformation. He emphasizes the importance of confronting the realities of racism in America, arguing that the artist's role is to reveal the truth about society, even when it is uncomfortable. Through Baldwin's candid words, the interview collection underscores his lifelong commitment to challenging injustice and advocating for a more humane and just world. And I will include the links to each of these resources. The Zen Education Project hosts that previous article I mentioned by Baldwin called A Talk to Teachers, and then this last interview is available as a PDF on the website richardgoldsteinonline.com. The seventh resource I want to recommend is called Here Be Dragons by James Baldwin, and a summary is as follows. In Here Be Dragons, James Baldwin explores the concept of androgyny, not merely in terms of physical characteristics, but as a reflection of the duality inherent in all human beings, male and female, black and white, and beyond. Baldwin critiques the rigid American ideals of masculinity, which he argues have contributed to violence, racism, and a fear of true self-awareness. He draws connections between gender, sexuality, and race, suggesting that these societal constructs often lead to dehumanization and internalized oppression. Through personal reflections, Baldwin emphasizes the necessity of accepting this complexity to achieve a more humane and honest understanding of ourselves and others. And so this seventh resource, Here Be Dragons, as you can understand from that summary, moves beyond addressing issues of racism to also issues of gender and sexuality. In the culture wars, we certainly see issues of gender and sexuality weaponized by individuals and groups that appear to desire a state of polarization and a state of conflict within our larger society and within our larger culture. And so I think it's really important for us to explore and expand our own understanding and conception of gender and sexuality. I think it's super important for us to strive to respect the human rights of every human being, to recognize that every individual has the right as they grow, mature, and develop to tell us who they are. I think many times there are people who want to tell other people who they are supposed to be or who they are not supposed to be. And so I really look forward to engaging in this essay, Here Be Dragons by James Baldwin. And the final resource by Baldwin, the fourth one and the eighth in this series that I want to recommend, is called The Fire Next Time by Baldwin. And when I was taking the Confronting Whiteness course last fall, this is actually a book that I purchased. And as I was looking for it on Amazon this afternoon, on this Sunday afternoon, I realized that I had already purchased it, and I've got to find it. It's here in the house. And so I'm going to read this, and I'm going to reflect on it. And here's a quick summary. The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, published in 1963, is a powerful collection of two essays addressing the role of race and religion in the United States. In the first essay, My Dungeon Shook, Baldwin writes a heartfelt letter to his nephew, warning him about the challenges of being Black in America. The second essay, Down at the Cross, reflects on Baldwin's own experiences with Christianity and the Nation of Islam, analyzing the intersections of race, faith, and power. The book confronts racism head-on and calls for radical change, urging both Black and white Americans to confront historical and systemic injustices to prevent future racial strife. And so as I record this in early September 2024, there is a great deal of uncertainty in our larger culture here in the United States. Specifically, we have a very contentious political race and campaign between Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and between Republican candidate Donald Trump. Tomorrow, on Monday, September 9th, there is scheduled to be a presidential debate. And race is absolutely an issue which is very prominent in political discussions that we hear today and the kinds of policy proposals which are advanced by different candidates. And it's just so important, I believe, for us to seek ways that in the midst of a lot of contention and polarization, we can find ways to bring healing and to serve and act as cultural healers. So I believe at different times in our lives, we can each benefit from catalysts which can provoke, encourage, and hold us accountable to move forward in our thinking and our ideological journeys of maturity and development. I am not a chemist by trade, but of course I've taken a number of chemistry classes, and along the way in my educational journey, learned that a catalyst, chemically speaking, is something that's present that causes a reaction. Without the catalyst, the reaction does not take place. And so using that as a metaphor here, I hope that the centennial of the birth of James Baldwin can, for you and for me, serve as a very powerful and constructive catalyst for us to engage in a variety of media artifacts, books, articles, podcasts, videos, both media artifacts created by other people about Baldwin and about his ideas, but directly with the works of James Baldwin. If you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to visit the website, healourculture.org. There is a contact link where you can contact me if you have questions or want to contact me about this project. This audio recording has been an audio draft of an article by Wes Fryer for the Heal Our Culture project on September 8th, 2024. Access the linked article by visiting healourculture.org.